Greetings sailors and welcome to a look at the Prinz Eitel Friedrich. Now this is a work in progress ship, I should say that right up front. We got this given to us today and I've only played about an hour and a half with it earlier on today, and all of those games were tier 8 and this is one of them. But it did give me enough of an impression to talk about it a little bit. Now, I'm not going to go over the stats in detail. There's actually a video from Stuntman from about a month ago when the stats were first starting to come out, and I don't think they've changed too much since that point. In particular, it retains a ridiculously good stealth value for being a tier 6 battleship, or battlecruiser really. It's also got incredibly strong AA for its tier, but, well, the whole thing is rather let down by the guns, and I'm going to say that right at the front. This is a bit like the Hood in some ways. It's a nice platform, but the guns can be at times incredibly frustrating to use, and this is over and above what you would expect from German battleship accuracy. On that note, that's actually a good place maybe to mention that it doesn't quite have German standard battleship accuracy. In fact, it has 2.0 Sigma, but it doesn't have the dispersion, the horizontal dispersion to go with it. Or is it vertical? I can never remember which one's which. Anyway, so it does still feel very much like you're firing German battleship guns. The other quirks that go along with that are the shells. Now, there is one other German ship I can perhaps bring in here, and that is the Yorck. The Yorck's heavy cruiser shells are subject to quite a lot of drag, and so the gunnery with the Yorck can at times feel quite odd compared to other ships. In fact, it's generally given with the Yorck that you fire HE at basically anything over 10 km, and under that then you can start thinking about switching to AP against some targets. But you still really want broadsides, especially when it comes to battleships. This actually feels rather similar. You'll notice I'm going to be firing quite a lot of HE in this one, and that's because I found the AP frankly not very good. The shells are, well, they're 350mm, which is just shy of being 14-inch guns, which is, what 356? And to go with that, they don't have particularly good penetration, which, you know, to be fair, neither does the Bayern, but the Bayern has got 15-inch guns, crucially, so it gets way more benefit from being able to overmatch things, which this doesn't. And those shells are actually quite light, so they slow down quite significantly in flight. And so you end up having to give a lot more lead than you would think, even based on the fact that the starting shell velocity, it's not fantastic, but it's not terrifically slow either. I think it's like 810, 820 meters a second, which is all right, you know. That's faster than the US battleships get, for example, except those are much heavier shells. And when it comes to, in particular, trying to hit targets that are actively dodging, it becomes a real pain in the butt because your shells just, they're so floaty, they take so long to get there, and there's just something really strange about trying to aim with this ship. And so a lot of the time I just fired HE. Now, if you've got a perfectly broadside battleship, even a higher tier battleship, you can sometimes get decent results. I think I had one or two salvos where I managed around 10k against higher tier ships. But for the most part, I reserved the AP shells for basically close range battleships that are showing broadside and some cruisers. And even some cruisers I was reaching for the HE because the AP wasn't being particularly useful. So it's a bit weird in terms of actually aiming, and then once you've hit, if you've managed to hit, because as I've said the dispersion isn't fantastic, it's not really going to be doing a lot of damage. And so this is why I mentioned the Hood earlier. It can feel like a real slog trying to get any decent amount of damage when you're playing the Hood. And at the moment, as the Friedrich is right now, it feels exactly the same. It feels like a long, hard slog to actually get anything in particular done. But bear in mind, this is after only a few games, and as I've said, they were all exclusively bottom tier, which is sort of unusual when I'm playing in the morning. Normally you can expect to get some more top tier games and the matchmaking isn't so harsh. There aren't as many people playing tier 8s as there are later in the evening. But no, I just got unlucky today, apparently. Now, I've said, the rest of the platform is really nice. It's got a ridiculously good amount of AA. This becomes basically the king of AA for its tier, at least in terms of battleships. The Queen Elizabeth can beat it for range. That can get out to 7.2. I think this can only get to 6.5. And, of course, if you do go that way, well, then you're having to give up the accuracy module, which you're probably going to want. But, you know, you can do that. You can spec it for AA. You can go for manual AA. In fact, you can put your manual AA captains in this and they'll do very well. Equally, you can spec it for secondaries. It's got those good German secondary guns, including the 15cm HE firers, and there's a reasonable spread of them. So you're not going to be maybe quite as good as, say, you know, the Scharnhorst or the Gneisenau for their tier, but still you're going to be pretty good for tier 6. And so you can go that way. You can put your secondary spec captain in and you can take the module that gives you more secondary range. But personally, I wouldn't play it that way. Personally, I would go for the thing that makes the guns less frustrating to use, because at the moment they're quite frustrating. And I say this as somebody who likes the Bayern and who likes the Gneisenau. I found these guns off-putting. Not enough to make me straight up say, oh, this ship is bad, but I suspect if it comes out as is, it's not going to be popular the same way that, say, the Dunkirk isn't popular. And hell, the Dunkirk's guns beat this into a cocked hat, quite frankly. You can actually pen stuff with the Dunkirk's AP apart from anything else, and the fire chance is significantly higher despite being a smaller caliber of shell. This only gets like 27% fire chance, which is, you know, it's still a significant fire chance, but you've only got 8 guns. At least you get to fire them fairly frequently, though. It's a 24-second reload. So as long as you can be patient, I suspect you will, over longer games like this one, this is going to end up being like a 20-minute game, you can probably manage to do okay. But like the Hood, it's hard to describe my experience of playing this as being fun, particularly. It's more a ship that you kind of have to suck it up a bit and just accept that the main battery is not going to behave. And yeah, that's kind of true for some of the other German battleships as well, but I don't know, it's just, it feels like when you hit with them, you hit a lot harder than with this thing. And that even goes for the Scharnhorst, which has, you know, smaller guns still. The ship itself, like the actual armour layout and everything, is pretty reasonable. It's still a tier 6, but it does have a kind of an okay belt. It doesn't go that far above the waterline. And of course, the bow stern are going to be subject to overmatching. One important thing to note is it does not have turtleback armour. This was a battle cruiser design that, incidentally, I believe was laid down. It's one of these ones that was they started construction, but they never actually finished. There was some pesky thing about World War I ending and Germany losing or something like that. Anyway, yeah, so, I mean, it is possibly a semi-fantasy design in that regard, but I suspect as far as the armour layout, they probably haven't gone too nuts about it. So you can't give broadsides in the same way, you can't pull the same kind of manoeuvres that you can in the other German battleships and get away with it. But it still felt okay, it still felt reasonably armoured. It's just you can't do anything silly with it, especially. The manoeuvrability is okay. It can hit 28 knots, which is okay. That's really quite an improvement over a lot of the tier 6 battleships. Most of them are kind of, you know, if you're lucky they'll reach 25, and I don't think there's many that will go over that. I think Mutsu is faster. I'm trying to think now. Fuso's not especially fast. Fuso's like 24 or 25. Bayern's 25. Queen Elizabeth's, they're what, 24? I can't remember. So, you know, this is not a fast tier overall, so that's quite a nice feature. But to go along with that, it also does have a fairly wide turning circle, although it didn't feel that horrendous, to be quite honest. It didn't feel especially sluggish. I think it's partly made up for by the speed, but you might have a bit of difficulty dodging out of the way with you won't be able to torpedo beat quite as effectively as you would in something that can turn more effectively, like in New Mexico, for example. Lastly, the stealth. I mentioned it's pretty damn good. In fact, I think it might be by far the best at this tier for the Concealment Expert Captain. You can get it down to 10.7. In fact, I think it's just under 10.7 kilometers. Which is, yeah, you know, there are cruisers that probably don't match that at tier 6. In fact, there will be. There will be cruisers that you can't get to be that stealthy at this tier. I don't know if that will stay the same, to be quite honest. That seems excessively good. And I can once again only emphasise that this is a work in progress ship. This is being tested. This is definitely not final. And, you know, to some extent that maybe a little makes up for the poor performance of the guns, because you can sneak closer before you start opening fire. But as you're seeing from, well, really this entire replay, and my experience with the other couple of games I played wasn't really any different, it doesn't hit hard at all, really. It's just not that sort of ship at all. I will make a little mistake earlier on, by the way. I've just realised, looking at the ribbons, I've got a Citadel ribbon. I think this might have been the first game where I had a Citadel. This was like the third game I played in it. And later on I managed to Citadel somebody else, and I go, woohoo, that was my first Citadel with this ship, when clearly it wasn't. So a little demonstration there of why giving broadsides to a tier 8 battleship is a bad idea. I mean, it would always be a bad idea, but yeah, that hurt. That really did, and it could have been potentially worse, but still, that was a pretty huge chunk of my health right there, and maybe the Bayern would have not done so badly there, although having said that, it still might have. It just might not have been Citadel. Although I'm not sure it was Citadel, that might just have been all penetration damage without Citadels. So, this replay, I mean, I picked this one out because it was notable for me hoovering up all the low health kills. I will get some more damage out of this, so it's not going to end on quite this low an amount of damage. But there was also just some nice teamwork going on. This was one of those games where the storm was annoying at points, but it sort of worked out for us because we were able to come back as a group, this remaining clump of ships here, including another circling, actually, a warship circling, Josa 95 there, who you may have, I can't remember if I left that bit in the chat, but he was referring to, you know, melting in temperatures of 45 degrees, because I believe he's in Portugal, which has basically been made out of fire recently, and just for the last couple of weeks while all this very hot weather has been rolling around Europe. So yeah, that can't be particularly fun. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, we stuck together, and we've managed to make what seemed like it might at one point be a losing proposition into a win instead, which is, you know, not too shabby. So there we go, another Citadel, which wasn't my first Citadel. Somehow I hadn't noticed I'd gotten one earlier. But with that, you know, it's still a battleship caliber gun. It still hits for like 10k and change if you do manage to get a Citadel. It's just, you'll really only be doing that against cruisers. I really can't think what battleships you might be able to Citadel with these guns, because they just don't have the penetration. It's a bit like British battleships. And again, we go back to the hood, you know, you don't really score Citadels on other battleships with the hood. It gets a bit better though with the higher tier British battleships, I have to say. But yeah, I mean, don't expect anything out of these guns, and you won't be disappointed, I guess. Personally, at this tier, I think there are more interesting ships to play. I would probably rather play the Graf Spee than this thing, but it's not horrible. It's workable. It's just, I don't know how popular Wargaming expect a battleship with frustrating guns to be, because it's not like the Hood is a massively popular ship, and the Dunkirk isn't that frequently a sight either, and that has much faster shells and much better penetration, even if the dispersion can also be really quite wonky at times. So this is, it's a bit of an oddball, really. to go back to what I said at the start, it's a nice platform that just doesn't have particularly good firepower to go with it. That amount of damage is not terrible that I did in this, and I think I had at least one other game where I was over 80k damage, but I think to get more than that you would be needing a fairly exceptional set of circumstances. But it probably would help if I managed to be not bottom tier, I have been bottom tier, if I managed to be top tier at some point. But I'll keep playing it, and I imagine that will happen, and I'll be able to see how it feels. But this has still been useful data, because it's a tier 6 premium, it's going to get down tiered a lot, and it's not unplayable. It's just, I suspect this won't be a lot of people's cup of tea. Or stein of beer, as the case may be. So, anyway, hopefully you have found this early look at the Prinz Eitel Friedrich useful, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down under the video, and as always, stay tuned for more.